The gavel cracked like a rifle shot in the stifling Virginia courtroom, and Gary Harlan's world shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. "Guilty," the judge intoned, his voice flat as the bailiff's handcuffs snapped shut around Gary's wrists, the cold steel biting into skin scarred by desert sands and forgotten foxholes. In that instant, as his knees buckled under the weight of betrayal, Gary locked eyes with his son across the room. Nicholas, barely 18. His cap and gown rumpled from the frantic drive, tears carving silent rivers down his freckled cheeks, and whispered the words that would haunt them both. "I'm sorry, kid. I fought for your freedom, and lost mine." It was June in Quantico, the air thick with magnolia blossoms and the salty tang of the Potomac, but for Gary Harlan, the summer of 2015 felt like the dead of winter. He'd come home from his last deployment in Afghanistan a hero in the eyes of no one but Nicholas. His boy, the one pure thing he'd salvaged from a life of foxholes and fractured promises. Gary had enlisted at 19, a lanky farm kid from rural Kentucky chasing the ghost of his absent father, only to find himself chasing demons instead. 20 years in the Marines. Fallujah's rubble, Hellman's heat, buddies lost to IEDs that turned laughter into echoes. He'd buried enough flag-draped coffins to know the price of valor, but nothing prepared him for the ambush waiting stateside. The charge? Fraternization. A bullshit allegation cooked up by a superior officer with a grudge, the kind that festered in the barracks like untreated wounds. Gary had never hidden who he was, not after Don't Ask, Don't Tell crumbled in 2011. He was gay, plain and simple, and he'd loved quietly, fiercely, in the shadows of secrecy that the military had only half lifted. His partner, back then, was a ghost named Elias, a fellow sergeant with eyes like smoked quartz and a laugh that cut through the chaos. They'd met in Kuwait, shared bunks and burdens, stolen kisses in the dim glow of tactical lights. Elias was the one who'd taught Gary that love wasn't a weakness, but a weapon sharper than any bayonet. But Elias was gone now, Kia in a roadside blast 2 years prior, and Gary had buried that grief under layers of PT and paternal duty. Nicholas was his anchor, the 16-year-old Spitfire who'd inherited his father's stubborn jaw and his mother's wild curls. God rest her soul. Cancer had claimed her when Nick was 10. They'd moved to a cramped apartment in Alexandria after Gary's honorable discharge, piecing together a life from VA checks and Nick's part-time gigs at the local diner. Graduation loomed like a beacon. Nicholas had aced his way into the Naval Academy prep program, dreams of Annapolis burning bright in his eyes. "You're walking me across that stage, Dad," he'd said, fist-bumping Gary over greasy burgers. No excuses. The courtroom farce unraveled from there. A domino fall of lies and loose lips. It started with a routine security check at the base, Gary volunteering as a mentor for the JROTC kids, flashing his old ID like a talisman. Some pencil pusher flagged an inconsistency in his file, dredging up whispers from the barracks grapevine. Harlan's one of those. The investigation snowballed, fueled by homophobic whispers from a chaplain who'd never forgiven Gary for attending Pride in D.C. with Elias's dog tags around his neck. Evidence? A faded photo slipped into an anonymous tip line. Gary and Elias arm in arm at a stateside bar, oblivious to the camera's betrayal. Guilty. The word echoed as they dragged him away. Nicholas's sobs the soundtrack to Gary's descent. He spent 3 months in county lockup, a limbo of fluorescent buzz and regret, writing letters on prison stationery that Nicholas read aloud to empty rooms. "Tell him I'm proud," Gary scrawled, ink blurring with sweat. "Tell him this doesn't define us." But release came too late for the ceremony. The Academy's ironclad rules barred felons from family seating, a policy as rigid as the parade ground's white lines. Gary arrived anyway, hitchhiking from the halfway house in a threadbare suit, his purple heart pinned crookedly to his lapel like a defiant middle finger. The guards spotted him at the gates, 2 MPs with jaws like granite, eyes scanning for threats. "Sir, your name?" One barked, clipboard poised. Gary straightened, voice steady as a salute. "Gary Harlan, here for my son, Nicholas Harlan." The clipboard flipped. A pause stretched like barbed wire. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harlan. You're on the no-entry list. Security clearance denied." Nicholas was already on stage, cap tassel swaying in the breeze, oblivious until the whispers rippled through the crowd. Gary's heart hammered, fight or flight, the old instincts surging. He stepped forward, palms open. Please, this is his day. I'm his father. The shove came swift, impersonal. A boot to the gravel, guards flanking him like wolves. Move along, sir, or we'll make you. Spectators gawked, phones flashing. A viral moment in the making, but Gary only saw Nicholas's face crumple from afar, the diploma dangling forgotten in his fist. They hauled him to the perimeter fence, dumping him like yesterday's trash, the cheers from the field mocking his exile. He sank to the curb, head in hands, the weight of 20 years' service crushing his chest. Elias, he murmured to the empty air. What the hell do I do now? Word spread like wildfire on dry tinder. By evening, Justice for Gary trended on Twitter, raw footage of the scuffle, captioned with pleas from strangers who'd glimpsed their own ghosts in his story. Nicholas, red-eyed and raging, live tweeted from the after-party he skipped. They took my dad from my graduation, a Marine vet, because of lies. Bring him back. The Academy brass stonewalled, but the internet didn't. Enter the seals. 6 shadows from the ether, bound by brotherhood and a code that Gary had once called home. It started with a DM from a handle called Ghost Rider 92, Petty Officer Marcus Hale, Bud/S Class 235, the kind of operator who could vanish in a crowd or summon a storm. Marcus had served with Elias, carried his casket at Dover, and never forgotten the man who'd saved his ass in a Fallujah alleyway. Saw the video, Marcus messaged Nicholas directly. Your old man's a legend. We're fixing this. He wasn't alone. The quintet assembled like Avengers from a Tom Clancy fever dream. Jax Rivera, the wiry sniper with a poet's soul. Theo Kane, the demo expert whose grin hid grenades of grief. Liam Doc O'Connor, medic turned advocate. Reyes Ghost Valdez, the quiet intel whiz, and Brody Bull Thornton, the hulking point man with a heart softer than his calluses. They weren't just SEALs. They were family, forged in the suck, and Gary's exile hit them where it hurt. The gut punch of a system that chewed up its own. Marcus rallied them via encrypted group chat. Harlan's one of us. We don't leave brothers behind. Plans coalesced over burner phones and back alley meets. Infiltrate the next Academy event, a post-graduation gala where brass mingled with midshipmen. Nicholas, looped in as the insider, slipped them blueprints and guard rotations, his hacker skills, courtesy of Gary's old field manuals, cracking the digital locks. Gary, oblivious in his halfway house haze, nursed a beer on the fire escape, staring at the Beltway's taillights. Nicholas showed up unannounced, towing a duffel of civvies. Pack up, Dad. We're not done. The boy's eyes burned with that Harlan fire. Unyielding, unbreakable. They drove south to a safe house in Fredericksburg, a nondescript rancher owned by Marcus's uncle, where the SEALs waited like specters in the lamplight. Introductions were gruff handshakes and backslaps, stories swapped over lukewarm coffee. Elias talked about you non-stop, Marcus said, clapping Gary's shoulder. Said you were the only one who got it. The love, the loss, all of it. Gary's throat tightened. Elias's memory was a live wire, sparking old aches. He'd loved that man with a ferocity that scared him still. Nights tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, whispers of forever amid the whine of rotors. Coming out post-DDT had been liberation laced with landmines. Buddies who'd toasted his courage by day, then ghosted by night. But Elias? He'd been the bridge, pulling Gary from isolation's edge. Now, these strangers, hardened by the same seas, offered a hand across the chasm. Why? Gary rasped, voice cracking. Theo leaned in, eyes soft. Because honor ain't handed out by judges, sir. It's earned. And reclaimed. Dawn broke over the Rappahannock like a reluctant recruit, mist clinging to the willows as the team drilled in the backyard. Push-ups in the dew, sprints along the riverbank, the rhythm of brotherhood sinking their breaths. Gary watched from the porch, coffee mug steaming in his grip, a pang twisting in his ribs. These men moved like he'd once dreamed of moving. Fluid, lethal, alive with purpose. Nicholas, clipboard in hand, bark times like a mini DI, his graduation blues swapped for cargo pants and a faded USMCT. "You're slow, Reyes. Ghost my ass." Laughter rippled, easing the knot in Gary's chest. For the first time since the gavel, he felt the stirrings of hope. Not the fragile kind, but the stubborn variant that survived sandstorms. Marcus pulled him aside post-PT, maps unrolled on the kitchen table like battle plans for Normandy. "Galas tomorrow night at the Officers' Club. Brass will be there. The CO who signed off on your investigation, Admiral Hargrove himself." Gary's jaw clenched. Hargrove, the silver-haired fossil with a penchant for traditional values, had buried more scandals than Gary had tours. The man who'd greenlit the probe, citing unit cohesion as code for discomfort with Gary's pride pin on his dress blues. "We get you in," Marcus continued, tracing entry points with a scarred finger. "Expose the docs. Faked timestamps, coerced witnesses. Nick's got the flash drive ready. Then we haul ass before the MPs swarm." It was audacious, borderline treasonous. A heist wrapped in heroism. Jack sketched diversions. A plumbing emergency in the East Wing, courtesy of Theo's homemade smoke pots. Liam prepped medical alibis, bandaging phantom wounds for authenticity. Brody scouted exfils, his truck idling like a getaway steed. Reyes hacked the CCTV feeds, looping footage of empty halls. And through it all, stories surfaced, peeling back the SEAL's armor to reveal the men beneath. Theo confessed over MREs to losing his husband to AIDS in the 90s. Before the pills, before the parades. Elias reminded me of him, that quiet strength. Liam, the Irish lilt softening his brogue, shared tales of stitching up wounded lovers in the field, defying regs with stolen morphine. "Love's the real op," he said, winking. "High risk, infinite reward." Gary listened, the walls he'd built in lockup cracking like eggshells. These weren't just operators. They were kin, bound by the unspoken language of loss and longing. He'd always carried his queerness like a classified file, compartmentalized, shared only with Elias in fevered confessions under starless skies. Nicholas knew, of course. The boy had walked in on Gary weeping over Elias's letters at 14, and instead of recoil, he'd hugged him fierce. "You're still Dad. Gay or not, you're the guy who taught me to tie knots and tell bullshit from truth." But the world, judged, labeled, exiled. The courtroom had been Exhibit A. Witnesses perjuring for promotions. The fraternization charge a smokescreen for Gary's weekend at a DC leather bar. Harmless catharsis, twisted into scandal. As dusk fell, the team migrated to the living room. Beers cracked and war tales unfurling. Brody, the gentle giant, strummed a battered guitar, crooning a sea shanty laced with double entendres that had Jack's howling. "To absent friends," Marcus toasted, clinking bottles, his gaze lingering on Gary with an intensity that wasn't just fraternal. There was a spark there, subtle, unspoken, a recognition of souls who'd navigated the same treacherous waters. Marcus was out and proud, a poster child for the post-IT Navy, but his eyes held the weariness of one who'd paid the toll. Family disowned, deployments doubled to prove his mettle. "You ever think about it?" Marcus asked later. The others crashed out on cots. "Starting over. Finding someone who sees the metals under the mess." Gary stared at the ceiling fan's lazy whirl, Elias's ghost flickering in the blades. "Thought I did once. With him. But life's got a way of fragging your plans." Marcus shifted closer, shoulder brushing Gary's. A contact electric, innocent yet charged. "Doesn't mean the war's over. Sometimes the best ops are the ones you didn't see coming." Sleep came fitful that night, dreams weaving Elias's laugh with Marcus's timbre. The line between memory and possibility blurring like fog over the bay. The gala dawned humid, the air buzzing with cicadas and concealed carry. Nicholas suited up in his midshipman threads, the flash drive tucked in his breast pocket like a grenade pin. "Love you, Dad," he murmured in the truck's cab, fist over heart. Gary nodded, throat too thick for words, watching his boy melt into the crowd of gold-braided admirals and starched spouses. The SEALs fanned out, Brody and Theo on perimeter, Jax sniping from the balcony with a monocular, Liam blending as a cater waiter, Reyes in a van 2 blocks over, fingers flying over keys. Marcus stuck to Gary like glue, the two of them maintenance crew, in jumpsuits filched from a depot. Infiltration was textbook. A smoke bomb popped in the kitchens, chaos diverting guards as they slipped through service doors. The officers' club gleamed, crystal chandeliers casting rainbows on polished oak, laughter tinkling like ice in scotch. Gary's pulse thundered, every creak a potential alarm. But Marcus's hand on his elbow grounded him. Eyes on the prize, the SEAL whispered, nodding toward the podium where Hargrove held court, pontificating on integrity to a sycophantic circle. Nicholas hovered at the edge, signaling with a subtle nod. Docs primed, projector cued. The betrayal struck like a sucker punch. As Gary edged forward, a hand clamped his arm. Not friendly, but vice-tight. Harlan. A voice snarled, low and venomous. It was Captain Ellis, the investigating officer, face flushed from bourbon, eyes gleaming with malice. Knew you'd crawl back. Security. The shout sliced the din. Heads turned, murmurs swelling. Gary froze, the room tilting, flashbacks crashing. Ellis's deposition lies, the forged emails pinning inappropriate conduct on Gary to cover his own graft scandal. Betrayal's bitter taste flooded his mouth. This man, who'd saluted him in the field, now twisted the knife for career armor. Marcus moved like lightning, interposing with a disarming grin. Easy, Captain. We're just fixing the AV. But Ellis wasn't buying. He lunged, radio crackling for backup. Chaos erupted, guests scattering. Nicholas diving for the podium as MPs swarmed. Jax's voice crackled in the earpiece. Hostiles inbound. East door. Theo's smoke pots bloomed anew, choking the hall in acrid fog. Gary broke free, tackling Ellis in a blur of fury, the two rolling across Persian rugs. Fists flew. Gary's honed by sandbag drills, Ellis's sloppy with spite. You ruined us, Gary roared, pinning the captain, veins bulging like ropes. For what? Your precious stars. Nicholas hit play. The projector flared to life, hacked feeds splashing across the screen. Timestamps debunked, witness retractions scrolling like indictments. Gasps rippled. Hargrove's face drained to ash. What is this? The admiral barked, but the evidence spoke louder, emails exposing Ellis's kickbacks from contractors. Gary's crime, a diversionary carcass. The SEALs closed ranks. Brody body-blocking reinforcements, Liam triaging a fainting socialite for cover, Reyes looping the feed to livestream on the Academy's site. Marcus hauled Gary up, their eyes locking in the melee. A moment suspended, raw with unspoken vows. We got you, he said, simple as scripture. MPs breached the smoke, batons drawn, but the tide turned on public outrage. Phones captured it all. The veteran rising from exile, SEALs standing sentinel, a son's defiance etching history. Hargrove, cornered by the visuals, snatched a mic. Cease. This demands review. Ellis slumped, cuffed by his own men, the betrayal's architect unmasked. Nicholas rushed the stage, diploma thrust skyward, pulling Gary into a bear hug that drowned the sirens. We did it, Dad. Together. As blue lights flashed outside, the team exfiltrated in waves, high fives in the shadows, promises to link up in DC for beers. Gary lingered, Nicholas's arm slung over his shoulder, the weight lifting like dawn's first light. But in the van's rearview, Marcus's gaze held a question. A quiet invitation to chase the horizon not alone. The fallout hit like a Category 5, headlines screaming from Fox to CNN. SEALs storm Academy Gala to clear Marine vet's name. Pundits dissected it for days. Heroes versus protocol. Prejudice's long shadow in olive drab. Ellis faced court-martial by week's end, his empire of lies crumbling under federal scrutiny. Hargrove retired to a consulting gig in Florida, his legacy tarnished. Gary's record? Expunged overnight, the VA fast-tracking back pay and benefits with apologetic letters scented in bureaucracy. Nicholas, lionized as the whistleblower prodigy, fielded recruiter calls from every branch. His Annapolis slot solidified with commendations. But Glory's afterglow faded quick, leaving Gary adrift in the apartment's stale air. Day appointments blurring into bar shifts at a VFW dive, where grizzled vets slapped his back and bought rounds, toasting the ghost of Quantico. Nicholas thrived, summer bridging to plebe year. His room a war zone of textbooks and tactical gear. "You're my hero, Dad," he'd say. But Gary saw the flicker. The boy's unspoken fear that the scandal scars ran deeper than ink on paper. Nights, Gary paced the linoleum, Elias's dog tags cool against his chest, the silence amplifying doubts. Redemption was a word for speeches. Reality was the empty side of the bed, the what-ifs gnawing like rats in the walls. Marcus called a weak post-gala, voice crackling over spotty cell from a layover in San Diego. "How's the prodigal holding up?" Laughter bridged the static, easy as old salts. They'd texted sporadically. Memes of exploding smoke bombs, links to think pieces praising their coup. But this felt different. A tether pulled taut. "Surviving," Gary admitted, sinking onto the fire escape. City lights winking like distant flares. "Nick's shipping out soon. Feels like yesterday he was knee-high, stealing my MREs." Marcus hummed, the sound warm. "Empty nest hits hard, especially when it's your only mission." A beat. Then hey, teams mustering in DC next month. Charity run for fallen buddies. "Come. Bring the kid if he's stateside." Gary hesitated, fingers tracing the tag's etched letters. Elias's name, a talisman against temptation. Flirting with possibility felt like desecration, yet Marcus's cadence stirred something dormant. The ache for touch unmarred by tragedy. Conversations that veered from ops to dreams without the prefix "what if." "Maybe," he said finally, a door cracked. "Could use the PT." Marcus's chuckle rumbled low. "That's the spirit, Harlan. We start slow, 5 miles, then beers. No pressure." Nicholas caught the tail end, eyebrow arched over a protein shake. "Seal boy, huh? The tall one with the jawline." Gary flushed, swatting a towel. "Watch it, plebe. He's a brother in arms." But Nick's grin was knowing, laced with blessing. "About time you had arms that hug back, Dad. Elias would want that." The words landed soft, a benediction from the boy who'd shouldered Gary's grief like his own ruck. That night, over takeout lo mein, Nicholas spilled his fears, not of the academy's grind, but of losing Gary to the bottle or bitterness. "You're not broken, Dad. You're battle-tested, and damn good at comebacks." The run was a blur of pounding pavement and pounding hearts, deceased monuments blurring under July sun. The SEALs reassembled at the Lincoln Memorial, singlets soaked, high fives echoing off marble. Jax led stretches with yoga flair. Theo trash-talked pacers. Brody hauled water like a pack mule. Liam quizzed Gary on post-op care. Ever stitch a lover mid-firefight? Drawing guffaws and ghosts. Reyes, ever the observer, snapped candids. Gary mid-stride, sweat sheened and alive. Marcus matching his pace with effortless grace. Post-race, they claimed a corner of the reflecting pool's edge, feet dangling, brews chilling in a cooler. Stories flowed freer than the tidal basin's breeze. Jax's poetry slams and dive bars, Theo's vineyard dreams in Napa. The collective ache for Elias woven in like a refrain. As dusk painted the sky bruise purple, the group thinned. Brody to a family barbecue, Liam to a shift at Walter Reed. Marcus and Gary lingered, migrating to a bench by the Vietnam Wall, names etched eternal in granite. "Elias is on here," Marcus said quietly, tracing a panel. "Not yet, but feels like it sometimes." Gary nodded, the tags heavy. He hated walls, said they trapped echoes. They sat in companionable quiet, the city's hum a lullaby, until Marcus broke it. "Dinner? My treat. No ops, just us." Gary's pulse skipped, fear and fire twining. "Yeah, us." The bistro was hole-in-the-wall Italian, tucked in Georgetown's cobbles, candlelight flickering over Chianti bottles. Conversation meandered. Marcus's Alabama roots, Gary's Kentucky hollers, favorite Springsteen tracks, the absurdity of MRE cheese tortellini. Laughter came easy, unguarded, Marcus's hand brushing Gary's over bruschetta. A spark that lingered. "You know," Marcus said, eyes steady over tiramisu, "that night at the gala? When you took down Ellis. I saw it, the fire. Reminded me why we fight. Not for ribbons. For this." He gestured vaguely, love, life, the fragile in-between. Gary swallowed, vulnerability alive round-chambered. "Last time I let someone in. It ended in a box." Marcus leaned in, thumb grazing Gary's knuckles. "Doesn't have to. I'm not asking for forever, Gary. Just tonight. And maybe tomorrow." The kiss, when it came, was tentative, salt and sweetness. Years of restraint unraveling in a back-alley cab ride. Marcus's apartment overlooked the Potomac, minimalist with nautical charts and dog-eared paperbacks. They moved slow, reverent, hands mapping scars like constellations, whispers trading histories in the dark. No rush, no conquest. Just two men reclaiming ground lost to war and wraiths. Morning brought coffee black as gun oil. Nicholas's text buzzing in. "Academy bound. Kill it, Dad." Red heart, Gary smiled, replying with a selfie. Him and Marcus, arms slung casual, the river gleaming behind. The SEALs group chat exploded. Emojis of rings and rainbows. Theo's, "finally." But undercurrents stirred. Whispers from old commands. Hargrove's allies sniffing for leverage. A leaked memo surfaced online. Harlan's reinstatement under review. Associations questionable. The betrayal's echo, faint but festering. Fall deepened. Leaves carpeting Alexandria like spent casings. Nicholas thrived at Annapolis. Drill weekends, destroyer dreams, but calls home carried strain. Heard rumblings, Dad. Brass talking character clauses. Gary brushed it off, but doubt seeded. Marcus became anchor, weekends in Norfolk, sailing rentals where wind whipped worries away. They talked futures. Gary eyeing veteran counseling, Marcus rotations to the Pacific. Love bloomed quiet, notes in lunch pails, stolen hours in motel rooms off base. "You're my port," Marcus murmured once. Post-lovemaking, fingers laced. Gary, heart full, believed it. Then the hammer fell. A midnight call from Jax. Incoming. Hargrove's cronies dug up dirt. Elias's file. Compromised op, bullshit. They're gunning for Nick's commission. Panic surged. Nicholas, summoned stateside for evaluation, faced a board echoing Gary's inquisition. Betrayal redux, the system unslaked, clawing back its pound of flesh. The SEALs mobilized anew, but this op felt personal. The stakes a son's stolen stars. Winter clamped DC in iron jaws, snow veiling the Capitol's dome like a shroud as Gary paced the safe house. Same Fredericksburg rancher, now strung with hazard tape and half-eaten takeout. The team huddled around Reyes's laptop, screens glowing with redacted files. Hargrove's web, tendrils snaking to JAG and congressional aides. "They're framing it as nepotism," Reyes decoded, voice flat. "Your influence on Nick. Undue pressure via scandal." Jack snorted, cracking knuckles. "Code for fag family. Classic." Theo paced, demo tinker's fingers twitching. "We blow it open. Leak the whole network." But Liam vetoed, medic's caution prevailing. "Escalate, and they bury the kid. Surgical strike. Docs to the right desks. Anonymous." Nicholas arrived at dawn, uniform crisp but eyes hollowed by dread. "They grilled me 4 hours, Elias's death, your lifestyle. Like it's a liability." Gary pulled him close, the hug a bulwark. "It's smoke, son. We fan it back." But inside, rage boiled. This machine he'd bled for, now devouring his blood. Marcus arrived last, duffel slung, pulling Gary into the pantry for a fierce, fleeting kiss. "We're ending this," he vowed, foreheads pressed. "For all of us." The words carried weight, not just ops, but the life they were sketching. Shared leases, holiday cards to the team, a quiet ceremony under Kentucky oaks. The plan crystallized. Infiltrate a Senate hearing on military reforms, where Hargrove testified as expert witness. Brody sweet-talked a janitor contact for access. Jax prepped props, fake press badges, a dossier in leather binders. Gary and Nicholas posed as aides to a sympathetic rep, a progressive from California's coast who'd championed repeal. Marcus and Theo tailed as security, earpieces humming hymns to precision. In and out, Marcus murmured en route, hand on Gary's thigh, a touch grounding as gospel. The Dirksen building loomed monolithic, marble halls echoing with Power's polished boots. They slipped in amid the scrum, lobbyists in pinstripes, interns juggling blackberries. The hearing room buzzed. Senators in elevated pews, cameras whirring, Hargrove at the dais, silver tongue polishing turds. Integrity demands vigilance, he droned. Slides flashing metrics on cohesion metrics. Gary's stomach churned. This was the man who'd eulogized Elias at the memorial, then weaponized his grave. Nicholas's cue came mid-testimony, sliding the dossier to the California rep, who flipped pages with theatrical frowns. Admiral, these discrepancies in Sergeant Harlan's case. Falsified evidence, perjured oaths. Care to comment? Hargrove faltered, jowls quivering. Irrelevant, Senator. A closed matter. But the rep pressed, voice steel. Closed? Or covered? Cameras zoomed. Murmurs swelled. Gary, in the wings, felt Marcus's breath on his neck. Now. As Theo triggered a projector hack, Hargrove's private emails blooming on the overhead. Slurs scrawled in margins, kickback tallies beside Gary's name. Pandemonium. Gavels banged, aides scrambled, Hargrove's face mottling puce. Fabrication, he bellowed, but the damage etched. Senators demanding probes, reporters tweeting firestorms. Nicholas stood frozen as the rep called him forward. Midshipman Harlan, your account? The boy, voice steady as Gary's old salutes, recounted the gala, the board, the bias veiled as policy. My father's a hero. Denying him, us, dishonors everyone who served. Applause erupted, rogue and raw. Hargrove stormed out, flanked by Flax. Exfil was a gauntlet, press mobbing the exits, feds sniffing trails. The SEALs herded them to a service elevator, Brody bulling a path. In the garage, alarms wailed. Shadows detached. Hargrove's private security, off-books muscle with brass-knuckled intent. Split, Marcus yelled, shoving Gary toward the van. Fists cracked, grunts echoing off concrete pillars. Gary swung wild, adrenaline surging, but a goon clipped his temple. Stars bursting, world tilting. Nicholas screamed, lunging. Theo downed one with a chokehold, but the tide pressed. Marcus dove in, a whirlwind of elbows and knees, SEAL savagery honed lethal. He felled two, bloodied but unbowed, hauling Gary upright. Go! I've got the rear. But as they peeled out, tires screeching, a shot rang, suppressed sinister, grazing Marcus's shoulder. He staggered, cursing, but waved them on. Clear the kid. That's the op. Gary's gut twisted. Love's first fracture, sharp as shrapnel. At the safe house, Liam stitched the wound by flashlight, Marcus pale but grinning. Flesh wound, cowboy. Buy me a steak later. Revelations cascaded. Hargrove indicted by month's end, his cabal unraveling in plea deals and perp walks. Nicholas's commission intact, even accelerated. A White House nod to resilience. The team toasted in the rancher's glow, war stories laced with what-ifs. But Gary saw the shadows in Marcus's eyes, the ops cost rotations looming to Guam. 6 months, Marcus said later, bandaged arm around Gary's waist. Then stateside for good. Promise. They made love slow, deliberate, bodies affirming what words faltered. This was real, roots delving deep. Spring thawed the Potomac's ice, cherry blossoms confettiing the mall. Gary started counseling at a VA outpost, guiding vets through mazes of memory. His story a beacon, not a burden. Nicholas, on break, brought a girl home. Shy, sharp, a poli-sci major, but confided over porch swings. She's great, but I'm figuring it out, like you did. Gary hugged him, pride swelling. No rush, son. Love finds its bearing. Yet betrayal's ghost lingered. A letter arrived, anonymous postmark from Norfolk, clippings of Marcus's file, psychological eval pending, post-op stress, whispers from command, the gala recklessness, the hearing insubordination. Gary confronted him over diner hash. They're gunning for you, because of us. Marcus shrugged, but tension etched his brow. Worth it, every scar. But doubt crept. Gary's past a curse, love a liability. Climax brewed in May, Memorial Day Eve. The team gathered for Elias's vigil. A bonfire on Chesapeake shores, dog tags tossed to flames. Laughter mingled with tears, toasts to the gone. Marcus pulled Gary aside, ring box glinting in firelight. A simple band, etched with coordinates of their first kiss. Marry me? After my tour. Build something unbreakable. Gary's yes choked out, joy fierce as foxholes. But dawn brought sirens. MPs at the gate. Warrants for conspiracy. Hargrove's dying gasp. Frame the seals as radicals. Gary the instigator. Nicholas roused. Frantic. The team geared. But Marcus stayed Gary's hand. Stand down. We fight clean this time. The arrest was theater. Cuffs clicked for cameras, but lawyers swarmed, precedents piled. Public outcry peaked. Vigils at the Pentagon. Honor the Harlans viral anew. Summer scorched the heartland as trials unfolded. Not in courtrooms, but the court of public conscience. Petitions flooded the Hill, veterans groups marching with placards. Love served, honor demands. Nicholas testified remotely from Annapolis, his uniform a shield, voice cracking only once. They took my father's dignity once. We won't let them take yours. The SEALs, sidelined to desk duty, funneled intel through back channels, Reyes's algorithms unearthing Hargrove's offshore slush funds, Jax's contacts in media lighting fuses. Liam organized fundraisers, Theo's wines auctioned for legal war chests. Brody, the Rock, drove Gary to hearings, silent vigil. Marcus's wound festered metaphorically. Nights haunted by phantom pains, arguments flaring over risk. You're pulling away, Gary accused one stormy eve. Rain lashing the apartment windows. Marcus paced, shadow long. Not from you, from the grind. Commands dangling discharge. Honorable but out. Because I chose love over lockstep. Gary's heart seized. Betrayal's shape shifted. Not from foes, but the machine's inexorable grind. Then we fight it. Together. Marcus stopped, eyes searching. What if it's enough? You, me, Nick on holidays. No more foxholes. The vulnerability cracked Gary open, Elias's echo fading, Marcus's light ascendant. They compromised. Marcus appealing the eval, Gary diving deeper into advocacy. A podcast invite led to a TED-style talk, From Barracks to Betrayal, Reclaiming Queer Valor. Gary on stage in a packed auditorium, voice steady, slides of Elias's smile. Applause thundered. Marcus in the front row, nod proud. Post-talk, a Q&A veered personal. How do you heal? A vet in the crowd, young and raw. Gary glanced at Marcus. You don't. You build on the breaks. Find someone who sees the whole map. Scars and stars. Fall brought vindication. Charges dropped. Hargrove's network gutted in a DOJ sweep. Marcus reinstated, but with a catch, transfer to Coronado SEAL Team 3. 2 years max, he promised at the airport. Duffel at feet. Gary's ring safe in pocket. Then Kentucky. Farmhouse, garden, the works. Nicholas, home for Thanksgiving, raised a glass. To ops concluded and new ones begun. The boy confided later, over turkey leftovers, I'm enlisting post-grad. Subs maybe, but dating a guy from my squad. Feels right. Gary's hug enveloped worlds. Pride, passage, the cycle unbroken. Winter wove them tighter. Video calls with Marcus amid sand-swept trainings. Letters scented with sagebrush. Gary's counseling caseload swelled. Vets unpacking closets long shuttered, stories mirroring his own. One, a trans sergeant named Riley, became mentee and mirror. You gave me permission to stand tall. The SEALs rotated visits. Jax crashing with poetry readings. Theo shipping Napa cabs. Brody proposed to his high school sweetheart at the rancher. The team best men in bow ties and boots. But conflict crested unbidden. A deployment extension hit Marcus. 6 months to the Horn of Africa piracy ops. Routine. He downplayed over sat phone. Static hissing. Gary, alone with Nicholas's empty room, felt the old chasm yawn. Betrayal specter. Not malice, but fate's cruel caprice. Come home, he whispered to the line. Nicholas, sensing the fracture, drove up unannounced. He's coming back, Dad, like you did. And I'll be here, your wingman. They hiked the Appalachians, father-son truths tumbling. Gary's regrets over Elias's risks, Nicholas's fears of the uniform's toll. Love's the long game, Gary said, summiting a ridge. Worth every mile. Spring 2017 bloomed treacherous. News broke mid-April. SEAL hello down off Somalia, dust-off scrambled. Gary's world tunneled. CNN loops, phone silent. The team descended. Theo with bourbon, Liam with metrics, 80% survival. Reyes hacking feeds for scraps. Nicholas went AWOL from drills, holing up with Gary. Cards unplayed on the table. Hours stretched eternal. Then the call. Marcus airlifted, shrapnel in the leg, but alive. Told you routine, he joked from Ramstein, voice slurry with morphine. Relief crashed like waves. Gary booking the first flight. Germany's sterile halls smelled of antiseptic and second chances. Marcus, propped in ICU, grinned through pain. Missed my steak. Gary kissed his forehead. Tears salt on skin. Idiot. Propose properly when you're upright. The ring exchange came days later. In a chapel alcove, vows whispered. Witnesses the team via video. In sickness, deployment, all the suck, Marcus said. I do. Joy tempered by truth. Love's fragility, war's whim. Back stateside, rehab became ritual. Gary shuttling Marcus to PT in Alexandria. Nicholas on summer's breaks playing nurse with bad jokes. The SEALs threw a welcome home bash at the VFW. Walls papered with unit patches. Stories swirled. Brody's wedding snaps, Jax's chapbook launch. But undercurrents pulled. Marcus's limp a reminder. Commands I lingering. A promotion board loomed. Whispers of stability concerns for the ringed vet. Climax ignited in July. A command picnic turned tribunal. Hargrove's ghost, a protege, Colonel Vance, cornered Marcus by the grills. Marriage to Harlan? Sloppy seconds from scandal. Rescind or kiss for goodbye. Betrayal's fresh wound. Institutional rot unexcised. Marcus reported it, but the chill set in, assignments dried, evals iced. Gary, overhearing via leak, confronted. We sue, or quit. Marcus's eyes stormed. Quitting's defeat, but losing you? Unacceptable. The team voted. Expose Vance? Full spectrum. Reyes doxed his emails, anti-gay screeds to donors. Liam rallied medical peers for affidavits on bias trauma. Theo's network torched Vance's donors. Jax penned an op-ed. When honor betrays its own. Nicholas, from sea trials, smuggled intel via encrypted drops. Gary fronted a presser outside the Pentagon. Marcus at his side. We served with pride. Demand the same from our leaders. Cameras flashed. Vance folded, retiring to consulting. Autumn gilded the leaves as dust settled. Vance's exit a footnote in reform bills, Harlan amendments, mandating bias training. Queer vet protections etched in policy. Marcus pinned Lieutenant Commander, the star a hard-won talisman, but chose transition. Out of spec ops into training command at Little Creek. Teaching the next wave, he said. Packing boxes in their new row house. 2-story craftsman in Chesapeake. Porch swing creaking welcomes. Gary's counseling practice bloomed. A non-profit arm with SEAL backing. Harbor Lights. Sessions under sails for sailors adrift. Nicholas graduated with honors, ensign bars gleaming. Sub-school bound in Groton. His commencement, a full-circle affair. Gary crossing the stage, Marcus saluting from the stands, the team whooping like banshees. "Full circle, Dad," Nick said, hug-crushing. He introduced Daniel, the squadmate, broad-shouldered artist with a shy smile, over post-ceremony crab boils. "He's good for me, like Marcus is for you." Gary's toast later. "To loves that endure the depths." Winter brought quiet miracles. A vow renewal under Kentucky snow. The team is family. Elias's tags laid to rest in Harlan soil. Gary and Marcus adopted a rescue mutt. Rookie, all legs and loyalty. Nights curling on the couch. Netflix flickering forgotten. Conflicts lingered in micro. PT flare-ups. Nicholas's deployments shadowing holidays. But they navigated with the grace of old salts. Talks over dawn runs. Apologies in handwritten notes. Betrayal's lessons wove through. Trust earned in increments, systems flawed but bendable. Gary mentored Riley to captaincy. Her transition a triumph toasted at Harbor Lights galas. The Seals evolved, Jax publishing a memoir, Shadows and Sonnets. Theo's Vineyard hosting queer retreats. Liam pioneering VA inclusivity. Rhea's coding apps for vet mental health. Brody's family swelling with twins. Bonds unbreakable. A constellation guiding dark watches. Climax's echo faded into humanism's hum. Honor not in uniforms, but unyielding hearts. One spring eve, Gary and Marcus walked the Chesapeake's foam-fringed shore, Rookie bounding ahead. 10 years ago, Gary mused, hand warm in Marcus's. "I lost everything at a gate," Marcus squeezed. "And found us." Seagulls wheeled, sun dipping gold. In the distance, Nicholas's sub sliced horizon, Daniel waving from deck. Life's ops continued, messy, mended, magnificent. In America's vast tapestry, two men, scarred and steadfast, wove threads of resilience. Love as rebellion, family as fortress. The guards shove a distant memory, eclipsed by salutes earned anew. Honor restored, no redefined, in every dawn's quiet vow. Epilogue whispers. Decades on, gray at temples, Gary and Marcus at Nick's retirement. Admiral now, Daniel's hand in his. The team, weathered but whole, toasts under stars. "To brothers," Marcus says. Gary adds, eyes misting. "And the loves that brought us home."